we've announced in the last two announcements, we've done new geophysics, which includes gradient array IP and gravity at the project Belara project area. And what we could see from those surveys was that we were getting similar results in terms of the physical properties of the rocks to the Belara known areas of mineralization, and then seeing other areas outside of that. When you actually look at it in detail, though, what you find is that the map targets are not exactly the same. There are differences between them. So the idea was to use machine learning to basically be able to compare the actual different data sets, which then allows us to include some of the more historic data sets, like the soil geochemistry, along with our new data sets, and then objectively compare them to the known mineralization and look for other areas where these features occur. So it allows us to combine 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 different maps in a way that is statistically valid. It's objective. It doesn't depend on a subjective analysis by a geologist. And it's really just looking for similarities and patterns between those maps. So the machine learning has actually worked very well. There has been a few issues with it, in that what we're actually looking at in the Belara project area is, because we're looking at underground mines here, we're actually looking at a 3D system. And because of that, some of the data sets only measure things on the surface, like the geochemistry or the gradient array IP, and other of the data sets like magnetics and gravity can see down to around about 300-400 meters. So we've had to use different training data to combine the different data sets together. So if you look at the announcement, figure 1, the map in the announcement, that shows you the known areas and the known drill results, which were used as training data, and basically picks out the Belara and Native B mine areas quite conclusively, and also then shows us other areas that have got the same geological variables as the Native B and Belara mine areas. We've got 34 targets. So 11 of those targets have exactly the same physical map properties as the Belara and Native B areas. So they are geologically effectively the same. And then the remaining, the other 23 targets have got something that might be missing or is slightly different. They are still valid targets, but obviously the 11 that have exactly the same map variables as the Belara and Native B mine areas are the ones that we'll be focusing on first. What is interesting is that the known mineralization at Belara, in terms of the historic resource, is 700 meters long, and that's what's been drilled. Whereas the actual modeling has brought up a target that's around about 2,700 meters long. So, and similarly at Belara, the actual target is much longer than the known mineralization. So immediately we have an idea of where we've got to drill to extend the mineralization at the Belara and Native B mines. And then basically there is one target area that really stands out to the south, which was coming up in the gravity and the IP, but this really does show it well. To the south, it has got the same sort of scale as the Belara and Native B mine areas, that has had no exploration, no drilling on it whatsoever. And it looks effectively, in terms of the maps that we're making, to be exactly the same as the Belara and Native B resources. So that is certainly is a place where we'll be starting. They've basically got the same geophysical and geochemical characteristics. One thing that's interesting, when you actually look at the targets at Belara and Native B, they're both on hills. And consequently, the mineralization outcrops, which means that the old timers, when they were wandering around the hills, they found the mineralization sticking out, which is why they actually mined and developed those areas. The area to the south is actually in the flats, so there's nothing sticking out, which is why there's been no development of it and nobody's looked at it. So that one actually is looking very significant because it looks like a continuation of the mineralization from Belara to native B. And interestingly, when you look at the geophysical data and the soil data, it looks like the anomalies might actually continue even further south than that. So we've got a really good pipeline of 11 targets to start exploring that will allow us to grow the resource areas at Belara and native B mines, and also extend the resources outside of the mine areas. So we're starting to build a nice portfolio of targets to grow the project organically into the future. They allow us to now start planning on where we go next. If we hadn't done this sort of work, we'd basically just be drilling along strike from the known areas, which in effect would have worked. But you can see on the map in the announcement that there are areas where there are gaps where there is obviously no indication of mineralization, which means that we could have wasted a lot of money on unnecessary drilling. What these targets will allow us to do is get into looking at these areas in detail. So the first thing that we really need to do is start understanding the geology of the new targets. And because it's basically been developed in 2D rather than 3D, and obviously the resource areas are 3D rather than 2D, we actually need to be able to get a bit of an understanding of what the 3D geology looks like. The new target area is over 2 kilometers long, so that's a big target to stick drill holes into and hope to hit something straight away. So the idea will be to actually drill a couple of holes for geology and hopefully use downhole EM, which should be able to identify mineralization at depth and what the 3D geometry of the mineralization is to allow us to better target our drilling and give us an idea of how big the mineral systems might be and what the sort of grades might be depending on the strength of the EM anomalies. Well, obviously we've got our resource RC drilling underway, so there will be, as I understand, some of the assays have already have gone in now. So we're sitting in May, so we should be looking at results coming out in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Hopefully we'll have the final assays probably towards the middle of August. And then we'll be able to start resource estimation studies based on the new drilling. We'll be looking, as I say, at doing the downhole EM data. So we'll start at Belara and native B because we know where the mineralization is. If the EM can map that mineralization successfully, we'll also do some EM at the ends of the anomalies to see where the mineralization might be trending, particularly at Belara to the north, where it seems to extend to the north, and at native B to the south. So there'll be news flow from that EM study. And then obviously by drilling holes into the new target area, even though the holes will be specifically for geology, there is always the chance that we hit mineralization straight away, which actually will make our discovery job much easier. My experience in life in exploration, that never happens. So we're expecting having to do the EM and then start understanding where we actually target to hit mineralization. But there is a chance that we hit mineralization straight away. So that planning is underway. And we're pretty confident that we're going to end up hitting mineralization. If this EM, downhole EM works, then we've got the other 34 targets to actually drill a couple of holes into, do the downhole EM, see if there's anything sitting there, and then we'll be able to target those as well. So I'd say we've got 2 years worth of drilling work ahead of us with 2 years worth of new discoveries potentially coming up.